Please listen carefully.
Well, hello, universe, and welcome to the Optimist Daily Update. I'm Kristy Jansen.
And I'm Summers McKay.
And we are part of the team behind the Optimist Daily, making solutions the news. We bring you reader-funded solutions news every day in order to change the tenor of news media, social media, and the direction of your day to help us all get focused on solutions.
7 days a week, we publish positive news stories written by award-winning journalists and delivered online to your inbox and through our social channels. And also, we are sharing these solutions in a commute-worthy, walk-worthy, home office-worthy, share it with your kids-worthy podcast. Today is Friday, March 4th, 2022. Hi, Kristy. How are you today?
I'm pretty well. I'm feeling pretty happy.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here with you this morning, and I'm really excited about our interview this morning.
I know. We're pretty excited about this interview, too. Let me frame it first. So my daughter, when she goes through growth spurts, wakes up in the middle of the night and often requests a snack. And last night, she did that. She woke up in the middle of the night, requested a snack, and I said, okay, but we have to watch Karma's World while you have your snack. So I could lull her back into bed, give her enough that she'll eat, and then crawl back in bed. And we got to watch the new music videos dropped by one of my favorite shows on Netflix, Karma's World.
Tell us what Karma's World is, because those of us who don't have toddlers probably, or small children, are not super aware of Karma's World.
Okay. I'm not going to tell you what Karma's World is, guys.
Okay,
this is so exciting
yes.
because our guest, the head writer of Netflix's Karma's World, Halcyon Person, is here today joining us on the Optimist Daily Update.
Halcyon Person is an Emmy and NAACP award-nominated TV maker who's worked as a writer, director, producer for everything from preschool television to late-night TV. She's currently the head writer and co-executive producer of Karma's World on Netflix. Before that, she was a director and producer for Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. She's a published author of chapter and picture books. You've seen her work on Nickelodeon, PBS, Apple TV, and she's been written up in the New York Times, Essence, Vulture, and the AV Club. Her mission is to create work that centers those experiences underrepresented in the media to foster greater understanding, and all through stories driven by humor and heart. And we are so thrilled to have her as our guest today on the Optimist Daily Update.
Hi, Halcyon. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you so
Hi.
much for having me. I am so excited to be here. I love what you all do, and it's so great to be able to talk about Karma's World, especially with someone who's clearly watched every episode front and back. You're a super fan, whether you like it or not.
Well, it's funny because my daughter is currently in a phase where she doesn't like to have her hair brushed. And so I refer to Karma. I'm like, well, let's watch the hair. We'll watch the hair episode and I'll brush your hair. Okay. But yes, you and I could dive in because I already know everything about the show,
Right.
But you're right. Our listeners, Kristy, don't know. Halcyon, tell us about Karma's World.
Of course, it would be a pleasure to. So Karma's World is a show on Netflix. It's geared to kids who are ages 6 to 9. But we've actually seen incredible success from kids ages 1 to 12. It's amazing how much love there's been for this show. It's created by Chris Ludacris Bridges, who many of you probably know. He's a Grammy Award-winning rapper. He's an incredible actor from the Fast and Furious franchise. He's basically a multi-hyphenate who does it all. And the most recent thing he's done is create this amazing kids TV show about a girl named Karma, who's a 10-year-old aspiring rapper. She lives in a Brooklyn-inspired neighborhood called Hansberry Heights. And she is using her music and learning about using her voice through her music to change her world. So the stories that we tell in Karma's World are joyous, they're funny, they're goofy, but they're also tackle real topics and real issues that we hope will allow parents and kids to have conversations and open up conversations in families and with children about topics that are as tough as, racial microaggressions and body image and anxiety and things like that. So the show is trying to do it all. It's trying to be really fun and exciting and joyous, but also touch on some tough topics that we know kids are dealing with in their everyday lives. Chris has been working on this show for 14 years. He started when his daughter, Karma, was 6. She is now 20. And it's been a labor of love for him to kind of create this project that can be so meaningful to so many families, particularly Black families, and to see a girl like their daughters, their sons on TV. And it's just been such a joy to be a part of it. I feel so lucky that Chris brought me on to be the head writer of the show. And we have had such a great time writing these stories and telling these stories to kids.
We talk a lot about representation in just even the images that we use on the Optimist Daily, right? And we are very conscientious about working with our writing team to make sure that we have diverse representation of age, gender, ethnic background, across abilities, everything, because the very winnowed sort of perspective of representation and the absence of representation across media has been a really big challenge for a long time. Tell us a little bit about the value of Karma's representation in children's media and how your work has played into this over the course of your career.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, I think it is amazing to see across our industry and across the entertainment industry, the journalism industry, across many industries at large, this real focus on representation in media and figuring out how we can better see ourselves. I do truly believe that if you can't see it, you can't be it. And the fact that kids are able to see themselves on screens, in articles being discussed, will mean that they understand their value, their place in the world, and that they truly can be anything they want to be. And that goes not just for, as a Black person, I love to be able to write about my experience, the experience of my family members. So it goes across race, across gender, across sexuality. There's so many ways that we can better represent the broad spectrum of humanity. And I think that with Karma's World, what we really tried to do is say that we started out with this mission of obviously focusing and centering a young Black girl, a young Black artist in our series. But we also wanted to make sure that if we were doing that, we were doing that in a way that would be really responsible and really groundbreaking. I think something that I really admire about Chris from the very beginning of creating the show and working with him, he always said that he wanted to make sure that this show was groundbreaking. Something he said a lot was that he wanted to push hip hop culture forward. He wasn't going to lean back into stereotype. He was never going to go back into what had already been done. He wanted to see what was new and be the leader of what hip hop culture could be. And I think for us, what that meant was that we wanted to make sure that Karma was not just a visibly Black girl on screen, which of course is really important, but that we could dig deeper than that in her authenticity, both of like her family dynamics and how she spoke and how she creates music, but also that she is a real girl, that she is a girl who is aspirational, sure, but also makes mistakes, that she's going through things that our audience members are going through too, that she wasn't perfect all the time, that she didn't have to be strong all the time, was something that particularly for Black girls who become Black women, who are often, seen as these strong, impenetrable, have to be everything to everyone kind of people, that they could see in Karma someone as fallible as they might be, someone who makes mistakes like they do, but someone who also gets better and grows and matures and learns. And that's such an exciting part of writing the show, is that we were given the freedom by Netflix, by Chris, to really show a character growing, learning, changing, like all kids really do. And I think that that's where, when I think about representation and authenticity, I'm very proud of what Karma's World has been able to do.
And I like it. And I don't have a small kid. I have a 15-year-old. So he's a little too old for this at this point. But the thing that I found really drawing in is that there is that intelligence, and it's not just dealing with the same old subjects that we're used to seeing, even in kids' television. That freshness is definitely there. I like that how you're talking about Chris, Ludacris, his perspective. I think that really does come through. And then you're a great partner in that. And also that you're putting hip hop culture front and center. And that really has sort of grown up. And a lot of us have grown up with that as a dominant force. I mean, the Super Bowl this year, it was the main show and it was fantastic. Yeah. But all of, Mary J. Blige and all of those artists are people that I've loved for decades. So anyway, a question I wanted to ask you is, what television shows inspired you when you were coming up? Like, how did that come into your journey as a writer, as you are now writing a children's television show? What's your history with television, and how does that come into your storytelling here with Karma's World?
Yeah, I have always been a huge fan of TV. No one will ever negate that. I have always loved TV. I've always watched a lot of it. And I think that it is such an incredible medium for storytelling, whether it's for kids, for adults. I've always loved television. And thinking back to what shows I loved as a kid, one that always sticks out to me that I think is just such a classic is Hey Arnold, which I think is a very different show than what Karma's World is, but in a lot of ways they have a lot of similarities. I think the thing that we really prided ourselves on with Karma's World is that we truly created a world. It wasn't a flat space that allowed our hero character to just kind of do what they wanted to do. We were creating a fully realized community, and that meant having not only Karma's family, not only her school and her teachers, but also the elders in her community, her next door neighbor, Mr. Crawford, who's kind of the loving but curmudgeonly, sitting on his stoop playing chess. We have members of her community, like her teacher, Mr. Single, not only be her teacher, but also be a member of the community who's helping with petitions and helping to change things when Karma is galvanized to make change. We really loved that we were able to create a real fabric of community for the show that felt like Brooklyn to us. It wasn't just sort of like, oh, we have school, we have home, we have friends, that all these things are interconnected. And that felt like Hey Arnold to me in a lot of ways. It really was showing a New York City neighborhood and all the characters, who lives in Arnold's apartment building. And I think our writing team drew a lot of inspiration from that show. And I think that I still think back of it. It's really a classic in a lot of ways. But yeah, my own experience with TV, I think, and honestly, my whole team's experience with TV has been so broad. We've worked not only in the children's television space, but I worked in late night TV, for example. I was like a sketch stand-up comedian, and we have people on our team who've written books and who have worked at Hallmark and writing, greeting cards and working on that sort of project. So our team runs the gamut in a lot of ways. And I think that we've all been able to bring our own experiences into the writing room. And that just not only goes for the writers, but our incredible production team, our amazing animators, our research team who helps us make sure our lessons are really accessible to kids. All of them have brought their own experience. And I think that vulnerability, that openness, the ability to really be yourself and share your full self in a creative space is truly, I think, what sets Karma's World apart, and something I'm so proud of that we were able to do.
I think when I watch, so I obviously consume unbelievable amounts of children's television. Yep. And, parents kind of beat themselves up, right, about screen time, right? Because in contemporary parenting, there is no choice but to include screens, right? Even the most sort of screen antagonistic parents, their kids end up watching cartoons, right? And
in the last couple of years, we've been forced to have them in our homes a lot more. It's become even more part of the curriculum.
Exactly. It's just, there's a show that is literally my daughter's brain candy that I just have to turn on when I need her to turn off. And it's Paw Patrol. And it's just great. Like the characters it's nothing but like flying happy puppies, and the humans are all one dimensional and generally quite lame. And the puppies are perfect. But they all do the same thing over and over and over. When I watch Karma's World with her, it's actually her checking in. It's her turning her brain on. And that is the difference in some of the shows that, as a parent, like you have to prioritize that screen time is going to be part of their lives. And watching a show with your child can be the opportunity for conversation. It can be the way that you further discussion. And in particular, Karma's World uses music a lot, which then the kids end up singing. The parents know the songs. You can be listening to the songs on Spotify or Amazon Music or, whatever channel you're listening to, and then continue the conversations and the lessons that are learned. Obviously, your, creator has a strong music background, but how do you, as a writer, are you adding into writing the songs and the stories? I mean, there's just this fabric that you're weaving, and tell us a little bit about how music is intentional in Karma's World.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Sorry, that was a roundabout way of asking. But
No. That's a great question. And I think, so it's so interesting you say that, because I do think all these different shows have such a place. And I love the landscape of children's TV right now. There's so many great projects that do so many different things, right? There's like it's just sort of like the content for adults, right? Like you have like the fun, action-packed escapism. And I think for us, Karma's World felt like this grounded reality where we could touch kids and what was happening in their day-to-day lives. And we were dream come true to be sitting with Chris in a studio working on hip hop music together. Like, truly blew my brain as a lifelong fan of him to be able to sit there while he worked and watch his process. But something, again, that we were so excited about with Karma's World is that we did kind of break the mold of how the music process in children's television is usually done. Often those are fairly separate processes where the teams kind of give notes on one another, and they're a bit siloed, and that obviously helps move the schedule along as quickly as possible. But knowing how, first of all, fundamental Chris was to the creation of the show, and also knowing that he is one of the most talented, best rappers of all time,
Right.
we knew we wanted to make sure we were using all of his power and the power of his brilliant, brilliant music production and writing team, all of whom were instrumental in the show's creation. And so we actually sat together. The writing team would sit there in the studio on a couch with Chris, sometimes very late into the night, just like you see in the movies. And he would rhyme for us, and we would work through the story together. We would talk about how this is what Karma's feeling at this moment. This is what we have to get across to kids. Here's how we do it in the most kid-friendly way with words and ideas that they'll understand. And he was a magic maker. I mean, I shouldn't call it magic because it's just really talent and skill, but he would, with his team, weave these incredible beats and these incredible lyrics together as we kind of gave input and talked it through. So those sessions were long. Of course, at first they were in person. We were doing it in the studio. Eventually they were on Zoom. They could be 6-8 hours long. But I think the final product is you really can see how integrated the story is with the music, that it really feels like a musical rather than a show where music is kind of like an added bonus.
Mm-hmm.
I love your description of that process and the way that it's integrated. And I feel like that comes through with the music because it has that intelligence and vulnerability, so it doesn't feel like total brain candy.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like, and now we sing.
Right.
Right. That makes it less annoying for the other people listening to it, because little kids really enjoy like the total repetition. But this kind of has that like Frozen where it comes in and it gets into your heart as well as your ears, and it enlivens your day. So I love that process. And with Chris Bridges, who you're right is such a talented person, it's nice that that's the core of the show as opposed to bolted on the outside. Yeah,
right,
and that comes through.
That's amazing to hear.
But speaking of male figures and the fact that this is Chris Bridges, I know that, and Summers and your father actually know each other too. So when we were knowing we were going to bring you on, we knew that your dad was probably an inspiration, because one of the main characters in the show is Karma's father.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that relationship between her and her father is also a super pivotal one for the show, and that I find really attractive. And I know Summers does too. So one of the questions we wanted to talk to you about is like, did you draw that inspiration from your father? And if you would just talk about the development of Karma's father.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I think Chris knew from the very start that he wanted to make sure that this was a show where the father-daughter relationship was front and center. He is a dad. He is a girl dad, as he likes to say. He has 4 daughters now. He just had one more daughter last year. He loves being a dad, and I think it has really like shaped his life and shaped his art in a lot of ways. So we knew from the very start that making sure that we had a really strong dad character who could lead Karma and be an inspiration to her, but also a shoulder to cry on, just a fully supportive figure in her life was really great. And we loved the idea that he could be a musical inspiration to her and a cheerleader for her. So we made sure that dad in the show is a musician too. So we can see where Karma's gotten it from, but also how she can find support when she's feeling down about her music, because, the creative process is never linear. So we love that he could be someone who could speak to Karma about his own life, about his own experiences, and be there to support her no matter what. When I came onto the show, I was very lucky that I have an amazing dad. His name is Conrad Person, which we took the name Conrad Grant for the show. That's Karma's dad. So I was very lucky that the team let me give a little nod to my dad in the show. But yes, I took a lot of inspiration from my relationship with my dad. We're extremely close. And I think in the same way that Karma and her dad are both musicians, me and my dad are both writers. And I love that in my relationship with my dad, we can be each other's cheerleaders when it comes to making our art and expressing ourselves. And that's a relationship that's only deepened as I've gotten older and I've become an adult. And in so many ways, I think in writing the show, in particular in the first season, there's an episode called Daddy-Daughter Day that I had the lovely chance to write about the changing of a relationship between an adult and a child, and a parent and a child, of just kind of feeling like as a kid grows up, the things that you want to do with your parents might change, but that relationship never changes, is something that I definitely felt with my dad. And yeah, I've drawn a lot of inspiration from Conrad Person for Conrad Grant. And it's a joy to get to write about our relationship because I love him very much.
I think what I also love about, I love your father. And for listeners of the show, you guys know that I did some master thesis work in Ethiopia, and Halcyon's father was actually one of my thesis advisors for my graduate work. So really, really special person in my life. But one thing, this elevation of the father-daughter relationship, showing a really, really good dad as a role model, what you're actually doing is you're not only giving representation for the daughter, but you're giving representation to fathers. And one of the things that media has done, of course we joke in Disney, they like always kill the mother, right? Like the mom's just gone, because like, how do you deconstruct a mother-daughter relationship anyway? That's a whole barrel of wax, but
it's Rapunzel.
Yeah, exactly. But just instead of just sort of dispensing with the parents and taking the parents out of the world, which happens a lot in children's television, is that the parents are just removed from the storytelling, because you do have to address the evolution of the relationship and the way that parents and children are not always perfect, and that they can disagree and they have to learn and grow together. So I love that. I kind of think that you're not only teaching our kids, but you're also teaching parents how to help parent and giving us lessons too while we're watching it. My husband travels a lot for work. And so I make Brennan watch the daddy-daughter episode when he's in town, because when he's not, she gets sad. It's like, I want a daddy-daughter day.
Right.
I think you're inspiring parents as well as kids. And I'm like tearing up as I say that, because it's really, really touching.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. These are challenging subjects that you take on, and you've talked about authenticity, but as a way to teach the children. But what are other tools that you as a writer and the team use to really inspire and teach kiddos? And what do you want them to take away after they've watched the show?
That's a great question. And to your last point, I think it folds in really nicely. It's like, it really is creating real characters. And that includes, for our parent characters, making sure that they are not perfect either, right? That they are learning, that they sometimes make mistakes. We have episode in our first season about divorced parents and what it means to be really supportive of your child, even though you may disagree personally about, that what matters most is making sure your kid can express themselves. And we worked really hard with a number of experts to make sure that episode really was, modeling not just for kids how to express themselves to their parents, but also modeling to adults how to make sure their kids can feel comfortable expressing themselves. In this way, I think that, with Karma's World, we are really trying to make sure that kids, through lessons that don't feel heavy-handed, that they're not after school special, that it doesn't feel like you're being preached to, that you can see a way of interacting with the world that might be different than your current experience, right? Or may challenge something that you've thought before. I mentioned very briefly earlier that we do research on every episode of Karma's World, and that means that we actually go out into the field with our brilliant team of researchers and talk to kids about each episode early in the writing process, before we even get into the animation or the voiceover recording. We figure out whether kids like the episodes or not. And I credit that work with the reason why Karma's World is able to push boundaries of what's discussed on kids' TV, because we found in our research testing that kids were ready for it. They were the ones bringing up like, yeah, I've been bullied about my hair before. Yeah, people have said that Black girls can't do XYZ, and that's why I feel this way. And we learned from that process that we could really talk about things that I think if we hadn't had that, people would say, is that too old for this age group? Is that too complex?
Which actually really reminds me of like the classic children's television, which was out when I was a little kid coming up, like Mr. Rogers,
right?
Who had that sensitivity with children, understanding that we need to take them more seriously, because they are interacting with the world just like us, and we can't really protect them. We can't shield them from the things that we think they're too young to handle, because death, bullying, feeling weird about your body, all of these things are things that actually young kids are dealing with. And just because we don't talk about them doesn't mean they're not struggling with them. So totally. I think that's brilliant. I didn't realize that you had that process where you're actually talking to young kids about their actual lived experience and then braiding that into the show. But now that you mention it, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's 100% right. And I think that particularly as it relates to matters of race, I think that something that's important is that we often hear, particularly from white parents, that their kids are not ready to talk about this. This is an older thing. And I think what Karma's World really shows is that for kids of color, this has always been a part of their lives, right? Like we know kids at an extremely young age are already categorizing people in a number of ways, including racially, because that's how our brains work. And I think that the more we can talk about these things in ways that feel supportive and positive and, affirming, I think that the better kids will be set up when they encounter these situations in their lives. So yes, with all that said, that's where we tried to push forward. And that's where we want kids to take something away, is that they're seeing hopefully things that they've encountered or will encounter soon in their lives, and that we're giving them a roadmap, a toolkit of how to handle those situations in their lives, whether it is a racial microaggression, whether it is bullying, whether it's anxiety. We actually have an episode coming up in the second season that's coming out in March 10th that is about anxiety and has real palpable tools like deep breathing and mindfulness to help kids deal with anxiety in their lives.
The fact that you just said these tools, so I was going to bring up, it's not in the questions we prepared, but the fact that you just said mindfulness, I want to bring up Karma's journal. Now, in this conversation, Kristy is an avid journaler and she writes in a journal as often as possible. I used to. Now I watch children's shows.
Right.
But journaling may come back. But Karma's journal plays such a central focus, not only in her music creation, but also in her emotional expression.
Yes.
And I was going to say in season 1, we already are sort of getting into what a journal can do. But in season 2, you're continuing on those mindfulness opportunities for children. Talk a little bit about the decision for Karma's journal and the other tools you're teaching children through this.
Totally. That's such a great call out.
Because it's really young, right? It's really young for kids to be talking about journaling. But now Brennan has a book that she walks around with and calls her journal. And she's 2.
That's amazing.
She doesn't know what she's supposed to do with it, but she
can't write yet. But
yeah, she can't write.
But it's part of her little iconic support system.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I think from the very start, the conception of this project, the idea was that, creative self-expression has so many powerful and positive uses for kids. In that episode, I mentioned about one of our main characters, Switch, and her parents who are recently divorced. She uses her version of self-expression, which is her violin music. She loves playing violin music and hip-hop DJing, and she wants to combine the two into this awesome mashup, but is worried her parents won't understand the new take that she wants to take on the violin. We know that creative self-expression happens a myriad ways for kids. For Karma, it's writing and it's in her journal, which we think is such a great entry point for kids, because like you said, kids love having a place where they can express themselves that's free and open, where they can feel fully themselves, where they can work through difficult ideas. We know that that's so helpful for kids to have a place to express and kind of like decomplicate complicated things that they're feeling by putting it down on paper. And I think that that's a first step to expressing yourself in ways that can be helpful, right? Whether, I think we have an episode in the first season as well about when Karma has a big fight with her best friend, Winston. She uses her journal to really unpack the feelings of frustration with him, then also realizing that she was a bit wrong too, that she actually had some part to play in their conflict, is I think something that only really happens when you take the time and are mindful and are able to put something down on paper.
Yeah, to be reflective of it.
Be reflective. It's so easy to get caught up. And I think for kids in particular, it's so easy to get overwhelmed. And I think that a journal and having a space, and particularly like a protected and respected space, which I love in Karma's world, is that it's not something that is, that's something that Karma really has for herself and herself alone. I think it's a great tool. And we see that across the show in other ways with music, with painting and visual arts. So we hope that no matter how a kid chooses to express themselves creatively, they will find a way in Karma's world, a model in Karma's world to do it in their own lives.
You mentioned that you're just about to launch season 2.
Yes.
Starting on March 10th. And we talked about Chris Bridges, and you've talked about your process there. I'm wondering also what it's been like working with Netflix, because that is the platform that Karma's World appears on. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious to know what it's like to work with a company like that. And I know that one of their stated goals is to bring more diversity and inclusion into their productions. And I think Karma's World is a great example of that. but I'm curious to know what that's been like for you.
It's been such a fabulous experience. They have been such champions of the show since the very start. It's admittedly rare to have a broadcaster or streaming service be so on board with taking some of the risks that Karma's World has taken and taking on some of the, big topics that Karma's World is taking. But they have been so supportive from day one on this project and really making sure that this show can meet all these ambitious goals of moving hip hop culture forward, of pushing the envelope, of talking to kids where they really are rather than where we think they are. They have been incredibly supportive of our research process, which obviously is a process that adds time to a schedule, adds money to a schedule, but they understand the real power of being able to talk to real kids and connect with real kids. So I think that is amazing as well. It's been so fun to see, I think having a platform like Netflix, which so many people around, it's a global streaming service, the fact that we were top 10 in 42 countries around the world, the fact that we're seeing kids from Brazil, from France, from South Africa posting their Karma costumes and them watching Karma is like the most amazing thing in the world. So from that end, the fact that we could push Karma out to such a huge number of people, we were able to, I think there's 40 odd languages of Karma that all released at once on the same day so that she is everywhere. And I think that, being able to work with such a gigantic company that has such reach across the world means that we're getting to tell these stories to so many people.
I didn't realize there were so many language versions of that. They were simultaneously released. That is really, that's making a difference with media, right? That is taking a stand, and to know that, the show that you've created has a global impact is, that's the solutions content, Kristy, that, that we love here.
Well, yeah, it reminds me, I think yesterday I listened to an interview with Terry Gross and Maggie Gyllenhaal, who produced this movie, The Lost Daughter.
Yeah, it was great.
Is a retelling of Elena Ferrante's work. So I think Netflix is in this really interesting transformative space in media, and probably some of the other streaming services as well, where these different kinds of stories can be told and have the massive reach, the big impact. It's not just in like the New York City or Los Angeles or these big media markets where there is that, quotes, diverse audience, because you can watch it in Brazil and you can watch it in Georgia and you can watch it in Timbuktu. I don't know, wherever you can get a Netflix feed. And also that it's being translated like that.
Yes.
I'm really into all the Korean shows they have on Netflix. That's what my family tends to watch, a lot of that. And I love that introduction to these different ways of seeing the world. And I think I love hearing that they've been so supportive of Karma's World, because that's one of the things that it really offers, is a slightly different way of seeing the world that helps us understand our own humanity at deeper levels.
The pandemic has also changed how the notion of media and movies and storytelling, right? Because we've recognized that so much storytelling and content consumption happens in the home, because the investment that used to be into sort of big movies has shifted into investment into these kind of streaming services and shows like this, because the reach is so much bigger. And that was shifting anyway. And then the pandemic really just put that on, hyperdrive, right? It just moved it very quickly. So it's sort of a preparation and opportunity situation for Netflix that they were ready to step in and step up. And it's just been really cool that they have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What was the reflection you were going to make, Halcyon? You were about to say something.
I was just going to add and agree with you that I think it's powerful to see that a show like Karma's World, which is speaking to a very specific experience, right? Like a Brooklyn-based kid who loves to be a rapper, is having this global impact and this global reach. The fact that it has been so popular around the world, I think, and for example, Kristy, you saying yes, Squid Game was the most popular show that Netflix has ever had across anything, that's created by a Korean director. I think that's showing, the power of these stories and I think the power of representation and the power of telling everyone's stories. I think that there was a fallacy, at least in my industry for a very long time, that to be universal, the characters at the lead had to be of the dominant class, of the dominant, they had to be white, they had to be suburban, they had to look a certain way, they had to have a certain set of abilities. And I think that we're learning more and more that that is just not true, that people are loving stories that speak to the universal truths of being a human, but in many, many different ways. And I think that that is one of the coolest things about watching Karma's World spread and seeing people from truly all over the world who look all sorts of different ways, loving the show and interacting on social media with the show, is that like we're seeing that firsthand. It's really cool.
And the thing that I find also really interesting there is, and that's something that the conversation with Maggie Gyllenhaal is talking about, how language really can change the way that we think and the way that we experience the world. So by telling stories from a different perspective and using different framing, different words, it can really upset what you come to expect as the only way or the right way. It shakes up the way that we think, and it offers other possibilities.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, ladies, once again, Kristy, you and I are deep.
I want to have like a full day of going through this, because I'm fascinated with media representations. And this is children's television, but it speaks to intelligent creation of ideas and communicating. Sorry, I know we have to end. So
I know. I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask the final question we ask all of our guests. Halcyon, what makes you optimistic?
I'm sure, given what I do, it's no surprise that kids make me particularly optimistic. I imagine you two feel the same way with kids of your own, but getting to work on the show, getting to speak to real kids, getting to see the reaction of real kids as the show's been released and gearing up for our second season, it is so amazing to see how kind kids are, how willing and ready they are to save the world, to change the world. It's beautiful. I really hope that we can get out of the way and let them do what they need to do, because that's kind of how I'm feeling right now as an adult, is that we just need to give these kids voices. We need to give them opportunities, and we need to give all sorts of kids from all sorts of places with all sorts of experiences the opportunities to not only tell their stories in my industry, but more broadly, make change. If we adults are able to do that, I am so optimistic that the next generation has the compassion, the optimism, and the power to really make our world better and change the world for the better.
Everybody, thank you for listening to today's Optimist Daily Update. Halcyon, thank you for being here for this amazing conversation. To all of our listeners, we promise to continue to share positive, solution-based stories with ideas on how you can participate in this changing world and ensure it is changed for the good. Everybody, check out optimistdaily.com, read our stories, share them with people you love, and check out Karma's World, even if you don't have a toddler.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Bye. Thank you.
Halcyon, thanks so much for being here.
Of course. So happy to be here.
A great conversation, and I look forward to watching you and your work in the future as well.
Thank you.
On Karma's World and wherever you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.